The mattress hit the attic floor with a dull thump. "It's just temporary, Mom," Isabella said, not meeting my eyes. "These influencers are paying good money to stay here." I watched my 60-year-old bones climb that creaky ladder for the first time, clutching my pillow like a life raft. The attic smelled like dust and forgotten dreams. A single bulb hung from a wire, casting shadows that made everything look smaller than it was. "The guest rooms need to be perfect," she continued, adjusting the thin blanket on what used to be a camping cot. Below us, I could hear voices. Young, excited, foreign. They were setting up ring lights in what used to be my bedroom. I stood there in my new living space, surrounded by Christmas decorations and old photo albums, wondering how I'd become a guest in my own home. The ladder groaned under my weight as I climbed back down for my clothes. "Just until Monday," Isabella promised. But something in her voice told me Monday was going to stretch longer than either of us expected. The first morning, I woke to strange voices and the smell of coffee I wasn't allowed to touch. "The coffee machine is complicated," Isabella explained when I appeared in the kitchen. "Let me make yours." She handed me instant coffee in a chipped mug while the guests sipped from our good china. I watched a girl with purple hair film herself eating the breakfast I used to make every Sunday. "Don't hover, Mom," Isabella whispered. "You're in their shot." I retreated to the corner, invisible in my own kitchen. The purple-haired girl giggled at something on her phone, then looked up at me like I was furniture that had been left in the wrong place. I climbed back to the attic, instant coffee growing cold in my hands. Through the thin floor, I could hear them discussing their content creation schedule and how authentic the house looked. I pressed my ear to the floorboards and listened to strangers plan their day in my living room. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was the one paying the mortgage on this house, but I was the one hiding upstairs. By Wednesday, I'd learned the house rules. Stay upstairs during filming hours, 9 to 5. Use the small bathroom near the laundry room, not the main one with good lighting. Keep my belongings in the attic. Don't answer the door. Don't use the kitchen when they're cooking. Don't exist too loudly. I found myself tiptoeing across my own floors, apologizing for breathing in my own air. The purple-haired girl, Zoe, complained that my morning shower was too loud for her sleep schedule. "Could your mom maybe shower at night?" she asked Isabella while I stood right there. Isabella nodded eagerly. "Of course. Mom doesn't mind adjusting." But I did mind. I minded all of it. I minded being treated like a burden in the house my late husband and I had bought 30 years ago. I minded watching strangers eat from my wedding china while I got paper plates. Most of all, I minded how easily my own daughter had erased me from my own life. That night, I lay on the narrow cot and stared at the ceiling, wondering when I'd become so small in my own story. Thursday brought new guests. The purple-haired girl was replaced by a couple who spoke only to each other and Isabella, acting like I didn't exist. They rearranged my living room furniture for better, natural lighting, and moved my husband's reading chair to the garage. When I protested quietly to Isabella, she sighed like I was being difficult. "It's just furniture, Mom. We can move it back." But it wasn't just furniture. It was the chair where my husband read bedtime stories to Isabella. It was where I'd spent countless evenings reading my own books, building the knowledge that would later become my fortune. It was the chair where I'd made the phone calls that changed everything. Now it sat in the garage, covered with a paint-stained tarp, forgotten like everything else about our family's history. I climbed to the attic and opened my laptop, looking at the bank balance that would shock everyone in this house. The number stared back at me like a secret weapon. Perhaps it was time to remind everyone who actually owned this house. Friday morning, I made my decision. I opened my laptop and began typing the email I'd been putting off for months. "Dear Mr. Rodriguez," I wrote to my property manager. "I'm ready to discuss selling the house. Please prepare the market analysis we discussed." The cursor blinked at me like a heartbeat. I'd built a small empire in real estate investments over the past 15 years, something Isabella knew nothing about. She thought my computer time was just an old woman playing solitaire. She had no idea I'd been buying and flipping properties, that my portfolio was worth more than most people's retirement funds. This house, her childhood home, was worth $800,000 in today's market. money I'd planned to leave her in my will. But watching strangers treat me like an unwelcome guest in my own home had changed something fundamental in my heart. I saved the draft and closed the laptop. Let her enjoy her influencer money for now. Soon enough, she'd learned that the attic I was sleeping in belonged to someone she'd forgotten how to respect. The game was about to change, and she had no idea what was coming. Saturday evening, I overheard Isabella on the phone with her friend Maya. "The money is incredible," she whispered, thinking I was asleep. "These people pay $1,000 a weekend just to film here. Mom doesn't understand business." I lay still on my cot, listening. She keeps complaining about the attic, but honestly, she's not even paying rent anymore. This is my house now. The words hit like ice water. My house now. I thought about the mortgage payments I'd been making every month, the property taxes, the insurance. I thought about how I'd bought this house with my husband 40 years ago, how we'd planted every tree in the yard, how I'd painted every room. Isabella had moved back in after her divorce, and I'd welcomed her with open arms. Now she was telling people it was her house. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. The balance was still there, $2.3 million, built one careful investment at a time. Money she'd never see now. I opened my notes app and began making a list. It was time to remind my daughter who exactly she was dealing with. The attic was about to become the most expensive room she'd ever rented. Sunday morning, I came downstairs to find strangers eating breakfast in my kitchen again. Isabella rushed over with a tight smile. "Mom, could you maybe stay upstairs a bit longer? They're filming a morning routine video." I looked at the man eating cereal from my wedding china, crumbs scattered across the table I'd inherited from my mother. "Isabella," I said quietly, "we need to talk." She glanced nervously at her guests.
"Later, Mom."
"After they leave." But I was done waiting.
"Now."
Something in my voice made her follow me to the small bathroom near the laundry room, the only space left that was truly mine.
"This needs to stop," I said.
"I'm not comfortable being hidden away like a dirty secret." Isabella rolled her eyes. "It's just temporary income, Mom. You don't understand how expensive everything is now." That's when I snapped. "I understand perfectly. I also understand that this is my house, and I'm done being treated like a stranger in it." Her face went pale. "Your house? Mom, I pay bills too." I smiled sadly. "Pack their bags, Isabella. The vacation rental business ends today." She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. She had no idea I'd just made the easiest decision of my life. Isabella's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You can't kick out my guests, Mom. I have contracts." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. "My property manager's contact information. Call him," I said calmly. "Ask him who owns this house." Her confidence wavered for just a moment before returning. "Fine, but where else are you going to live? You need me." The entitlement in her voice was staggering. I thought about all the other properties I owned, the apartments across town, the beach house she didn't know existed. "I'll figure something out," I said. She stormed out of the bathroom, and within minutes I could hear her making frantic phone calls. "Mom's having some kind of breakdown," she whispered to someone. "She thinks she owns the house." I sat on the edge of the bathtub and opened my laptop again. The draft email to my property manager was still there, waiting. I changed one word. Instead of "discuss selling," I wrote, "list immediately." Then I added a new line. "The tenant currently living here will need 30 days notice." I hit send before I could change my mind. By tomorrow morning, this house would be on the market, and Isabella would learn exactly who owned what. Monday morning brought chaos. Isabella's guests left early, confused by the tension in the house. I watched from my attic window as they loaded their camera equipment, whispering among themselves. Isabella stomped around downstairs, slamming doors and talking loudly on the phone. "She's lost her mind," I heard her tell someone. "She actually thinks she can kick me out." Around noon, my property manager called. "Mrs. Torres, I've had several calls from a young woman claiming to own your property." I assured her the deed is in your name alone. I smiled, looking down at Isabella pacing in the backyard. "Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez." When can we get the for sale sign up? Within 2 hours, a realtor arrived with papers and a bright red sign. I watched from my attic perch as Isabella ran outside, arguing with the man as he hammered the sign into our front lawn. Neighbors began gathering, curious about the drama. Isabella's face was red with embarrassment as she gestured wildly at the sign. I climbed down the ladder one last time and walked outside to join the conversation. It was time to make things crystal clear. "Mom, tell him this is a mistake," Isabella demanded as I approached the realtor. The neighbors were watching now, drawn by the raised voices and the sudden appearance of a for sale sign. Mrs. Chen from next door looked confused. "Eleanor, are you really selling?" I smiled politely. "Yes, I am. This gentleman is helping me prepare for the move." Isabella's face went white. "Move? What move?" "This is our house." The realtor looked uncomfortable, clearly caught in family drama he hadn't expected. I handed him the keys. All of them, including the ones Isabella didn't know I'd had made.
"These go in the lockbox," I said.
"The current tenant has 30 days to vacate." Isabella grabbed my arm. "Tenant? Mom, what are you talking about?" I gently removed her hand. "You told Maya this was your house now. You told me I wasn't paying rent. Well, if I'm not the homeowner, then I must be a tenant. And if you're not paying rent either, then you must be a tenant too." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But I live here." I nodded sadly. "Not anymore. The new owners might not want renters." That evening, Isabella sat at the kitchen table with papers spread everywhere. Bills, bank statements, rental agreements with her influencer guests. She was finally doing math she should have done months ago. "Mom," she said quietly, "I can't afford this house by myself." I stood in the doorway, no longer banished to the attic. The house felt different now, lighter somehow. "I know," I said. She looked up at me with eyes that reminded me of the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "Why didn't you tell me you owned it outright? I thought we were both just living here." For the first time in months, I sat down at my own kitchen table. "You never asked. You assumed. And when you started treating me like an unwelcome guest in my own home, I realized you'd forgotten something important." She fidgeted with her pen. "What?" I leaned forward. "You forgot that I'm not just your mother. I'm also a person who deserves basic respect and dignity. And I'm certainly not someone who should be sleeping in an attic so strangers can film videos in my bedroom." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "I was just trying to make money. Everything is so expensive, and I thought." She trailed off, finally understanding how backwards everything had become. Tuesday morning brought the first showing. Potential buyers walked through every room while Isabella and I sat in the backyard with our coffee. She'd been quiet since last night's conversation, processing the reality that her childhood home was about to belong to strangers. "Mom," she said finally, "I messed up. I know I did. But is there any way?" She gestured helplessly at the house. I sipped my coffee and watched a young couple examine our kitchen through the window. They looked excited, pointing at features my husband and I had saved months to afford. "Anyway, what?" I asked. Isabella took a shaky breath. "Any way we can fix this? I can get a real job. I can pay rent. I can treat you better." I studied her face, looking for sincerity beneath the panic. "Isabella, this isn't about rent money. This is about respect. About remembering that I'm a human being, not just a convenient roommate you can stick in the attic when company comes." She nodded, tears starting to fall. "I know.
"I'm sorry."
"I'm so sorry." I set down my coffee cup. "I believe you're sorry. But sorry doesn't undo the damage. Sorry doesn't give me back the nights I slept on a cot in my own house." The house sold within a week. Cash offer, no inspections needed, closing in 30 days. I signed the papers in my property manager's office, while Isabella sat beside me in stunned silence. $847,000, the realtor announced cheerfully. "Congratulations, Mrs. Torres." Isabella's head snapped up. 800,000, she whispered. I nodded. After fees and taxes, about $790,000. She stared at me as the magnitude of what she'd lost began to sink in. This wasn't just about losing her childhood home. It was about losing an inheritance she'd never appreciated. On the drive home, she was quiet until we stopped at a red light. "Mom, what are you going to do with the money?" I looked straight ahead. "I'm buying a smaller place. Something more suitable for one person." The light turned green, but her question hung in the air between us. What she really wanted to know was whether she'd be invited to live in whatever came next. I let her wonder. After months of uncertainty about my place in her life, it seemed fair that she should experience some uncertainty about her place in mine. Moving day arrived faster than I'd expected. I'd found a beautiful townhouse across the city. 2 bedrooms, a garden, space for an office where I could manage my investments in peace. Isabella helped me pack, her movements careful and subdued. "The new place looks nice in the photos," she said, folding my sweaters with more care than she'd shown in months. I nodded, wrapping my husband's favorite coffee mug in newspaper. "It has good light for reading." She paused. "Will there be space for if I needed to visit?" I looked at her, really looked at her. The desperation in her voice was familiar. It was the same tone she'd used as a teenager when she'd broken curfew and needed forgiveness. "Isabella, you're my daughter. You'll always be welcome to visit." Relief flooded her face. "What about more than visiting?" I set down the mug and faced her directly. "What exactly are you asking?" She took a deep breath. "Could I possibly live with you again? Start over? I promise I'll be different." I considered her request carefully. The girl who'd banished me to an attic was asking for a second chance. The question was whether I was ready to give her one. That evening, I gave Isabella my answer. We sat in my new townhouse, surrounded by boxes and the echo of empty rooms. "You can stay," I said, "but there are conditions." Her relief was immediate, but I held up a hand. "First, you pay rent. Market rate. I'm not running a charity anymore." She nodded eagerly. "Second, you get a real job. The influencer hosting business ends completely." Another nod. "Third, we both see a counselor. Together and separately. What happened between us can't happen again." She hesitated at this one, but agreed. "And finally," I said, looking around at the empty house, "this place has 2 bedrooms. Not 3. There's no attic, no spare room for you to banish me to when I become inconvenient. We're equals here, or you can find somewhere else to live." Isabella was quiet for a long moment. "I understand," she said finally. "I know I hurt you. I know I treated you terribly. I got caught up in making money, and I forgot what was important." I pulled out my laptop and showed her something I'd been working on. "I want you to see this," I said, turning the screen toward her. It was my investment portfolio. Every property, every stock, every carefully planned financial decision I'd made over 15 years. Isabella stared at the screen in shock. "Mom, this says your worth." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. $2.3 million, I said calmly. "Give or take, depending on market fluctuations." Her hands flew to her mouth. "You're a millionaire?"
How?
"When?" I closed the laptop and set it aside. "I started small after your father died. A little rental property here, some stocks there. I'm good with numbers, Isabella. I always have been. You just never paid attention." She looked stunned. "Why didn't you tell me?" I leaned back in my chair. "Because I wanted to leave it to you someday. I wanted to surprise you with financial security you'd never have to worry about. But when you started treating me like a burden in my own home, I realized you weren't ready for that kind of responsibility." The silence stretched between us. Finally, she whispered, Am I still in your will?" I met her eyes directly. "That depends entirely on the woman you become from this point forward. The will isn't written yet. There's still time to earn your place in it, or to lose it forever." The choice, I told her, was entirely hers. 3 months later, Isabella had found a job at a marketing firm downtown. Not glamorous, but steady work with benefits and growth potential. She paid her rent on time, kept her space clean, and joined me for dinner most evenings without being asked. The counseling sessions were difficult but productive. We talked about respect, boundaries, and the ways we'd both failed each other over the years. I think I was jealous, Isabella admitted during one session. You seemed so self-sufficient after Dad died. I wanted to be needed. Our therapist nodded thoughtfully. And how did that need manifest in your behavior at home? Isabella squirmed. I guess I tried to make myself indispensable by making Mom seem less capable. Like she needed me to handle the important stuff while she just existed. The truth was uncomfortable but necessary. I'd enabled some of this by staying quiet, by accepting less than I deserved rather than speaking up. We were both learning new patterns, new ways of being mother and daughter that didn't require one of us to be small for the other to feel big. 6 months into our new arrangement, Isabella came home from work with exciting news. I got promoted, she announced, grinning widely. Assistant account manager with a 20% raise. I felt genuine pride swell in my chest. Congratulations, sweetheart. That's wonderful. She set her purse down and looked around our cozy townhouse. You know what's funny? I'm happier here than I ever was in the old house, even though it's smaller. I smiled, stirring the soup I'd made for dinner. Why do you think that is? She considered the question seriously. Because it feels honest. Like we're both here because we choose to be, not because one of us has nowhere else to go. It was a mature observation, one that showed how much she'd grown. That night, as we cleaned dishes together, she asked quietly, Mom, do you think you'll ever forgive me? Really forgive me? I dried a plate slowly, thinking. Isabella, forgiveness isn't a destination. It's a daily choice. And most days now, I choose it. She smiled, and for the first time in years, it felt like we were truly family again. A year after the sale, I got a letter that made me laugh out loud. The people who'd bought our old house were selling it. They'd painted everything beige, removed the character we'd spent decades building, and discovered that maintaining a large house was more expensive than they'd planned. The asking price was $950,000, over $100,000 more than they'd paid me. Isabella read the letter over my shoulder. Do you miss it? She asked. I shook my head. I miss the memories we made there when you were little. But I don't miss being treated like a stranger in my own home. She was quiet for a moment. I keep thinking about those people I hosted. How entitled they were. How I enabled it. I nodded. We teach people how to treat us, Isabella. I taught you that I'd accept scraps. You taught them that I was invisible. She sighed deeply. I wish I could apologize to you again. I touched her arm gently. The best apology is changed behavior. And you've definitely done that. That evening, I pulled out my laptop and began updating my will. It was time to make some decisions about the future. 2 years after our fresh start, I decided it was time for a celebration. I just closed on my largest investment property yet, a small apartment complex that would provide steady income for decades. Isabella had been promoted again and was dating a kind man who treated both of us with respect. I have something to show you, I told her over dinner. I handed her an envelope marked Future Plans. Inside was a copy of my updated will, along with detailed explanations of my investment strategy and property management contacts. You're leaving everything to me? She asked, voice barely a whisper. I nodded. But there's more. The second page outlined my plan for gradually transferring ownership of properties to her while I was still alive, allowing me to teach her the business firsthand. I don't want you to inherit money, Isabella. I want you to inherit knowledge. The ability to build wealth, not just spend it. Her eyes filled with tears. Mom, I don't deserve this. Not after what I did. I reached across the table and took her hand. You've spent 2 years proving that you do deserve it. The question is, are you ready for the responsibility? Isabella's answer was yes, but she wanted to earn it properly. Teach me everything, she said. I want to understand every investment, every decision, every risk you've taken. So I did. We spent evenings going over property reports, weekends visiting potential investments, mornings reviewing market trends. She was a quick learner, asking smart questions and challenging assumptions. Why did you choose this neighborhood for your first rental? She'd ask. Or how did you know these stocks would perform well? Watching her mind engage with the business was like watching her become the adult I'd always hoped she'd be. 3 months into her education, she made her first independent investment, a small duplex that needed minor repairs. I'll manage the renovation myself, she said confidently. And I'll handle the tenant screening. I felt pride mixed with a hint of worry. Are you sure you're ready? She smiled. Mom, you raised me to be capable. It just took me a while to remember that. 6 months later, her duplex was fully rented with a waiting list of potential tenants. She'd found her calling. On the 3rd anniversary of leaving our old house, Isabella surprised me with a gift. Close your eyes, she said, leading me to the living room. When I opened them, there was my husband's reading chair, the one that had been banished to the garage, the one I thought was lost forever. How did you? I began. I bought it back from the new owners, she explained. It took some convincing and more money than it was worth, but I couldn't stand the thought of it being gone. I ran my hands over the familiar fabric, remembering all the evenings my husband had spent there, all the stories he'd read to little Isabella. This is the most thoughtful gift anyone's ever given me, I whispered. She knelt beside the chair. Mom, I know I can't undo the hurt I caused, but I wanted you to have this piece of Dad back, this piece of our family history. I pulled her into a hug, both of us crying now. You didn't just give me back the chair, Isabella. You gave me back my daughter. That night, I sat in the chair for the first time in years, feeling my husband's presence and my daughter's love surrounding me like a warm blanket. 5 years after our new beginning, Isabella called me from her office with news that took my breath away. Mom, sit down. I just got off the phone with a developer who wants to buy the apartment complex for a hotel project. I gripped the phone tighter. How much? Her voice was shaking with excitement. 4.2 million. For the property you bought for 800,000. I sat in stunned silence, calculating. After taxes and fees, we'd still clear over $3 million. Isabella, that would make us rich, she finished. Really, truly rich. But more than the money, I felt proud. Proud of the investment, yes, but mostly proud of the woman Isabella had become. She'd learned to spot opportunities, manage risks, and build something lasting. What do you think we should do? She asked. I smiled, looking around our little townhouse that had become such a happy home. I think we should celebrate. And then we should find our next investment. This is just the beginning. That night, we toasted with champagne and talked about the future, our future, built on mutual respect and shared dreams. The sale went through without a hitch. Isabella handled most of the paperwork, demonstrating the business skills she developed over the past 5 years. I never thought I'd be this good at something that wasn't about getting attention, she mused as we signed the final documents. I laughed. You were always smart, Isabella. You just needed to find the right outlet for it. With our newfound wealth, we made some changes. Isabella bought her own townhouse 2 blocks away, close enough for daily coffee dates, far enough for independence. I upgraded to a house with a garden and a proper office. But the biggest change was in how we saw ourselves and each other. We weren't just mother and daughter anymore. We were business partners, friends, and family in the truest sense. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't sold the old house? Isabella asked during one of our morning walks. I considered the question. I think we'd still be stuck in the same patterns. You'd still be treating me like furniture, and I'd still be letting you. She nodded soberly. The attic saved us, didn't it? In a weird way. I smiled. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what you're really worth. 10 years later, I'm sitting in my garden, watching Isabella teach her daughter how to plant tomatoes. My granddaughter, Sophie, is 7 years old and full of questions about everything. Grandma Eleanor, Mom says you're really good with money. Will you teach me too? I laugh, remembering another little girl who once asked different questions. When you're older, sweetheart. But for now, let's focus on growing things. Isabella catches my eye and smiles. She's built her own successful property management company, inspired by our journey together. Our portfolio now spans 3 states and generates enough passive income for both our families to live comfortably forever. But more valuable than any bank balance is the relationship we rebuilt from the ashes of that terrible year. You know what I learned? Isabella says, joining me on the garden bench while Sophie plays. Money isn't about power over other people. It's about freedom to choose kindness. I nod, watching my granddaughter's joyful exploration of the garden. That's exactly right. As the sun sets, I think about that cramped attic, that narrow cot, that feeling of being erased from my own life. It led to this, a garden, a family, a legacy built on respect and love. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the door to the best thing that ever could. I'm grateful I was brave enough to walk through it.